or concern, I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
Do you have a second? It's been moved
Second,
and
Canfield
seconded.
Rogers.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes.
Hey, this is Director Renz. Before we move forward, I just want to clarify, there were public session and executive session minutes from the August 26th meeting. So I think what we can have Carol or whoever's running the platform do is display those executive session minutes. Do we not actually? Okay, they were included. Okay, they were included in committee members' meeting materials from last week. So if we could do just a separate vote on those executive session minutes as well.
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the executive committee
So
meeting?
moved.
Second.
Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded to accept the meeting minutes from the executive committee. All in favor, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Okay, so for starters, I apologize about my camera. I'll have my technical issues sorted out here in a moment. And while that happens, let's go to public comment.
Right, so I do have one person that was pre-registered for public comment. That would be Tom Pledgy. It looks like his hand is already raised. I'm going to authorize his microphone. You there, Tom?
Hello, can you hear me there?
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Budget Director Cade and the SEBC. I sent in some written comments concerning the work of Brian Fesser from WTW. As you will recall, last month, I had some concerns about his long-term projections, what he called Scenario 2, whereby he is recommending at that time, this is in August, a 4.1% increase in premiums for FY 26, 27, and 28. And as you look at the documents that you have today, he's worked on things, and in his September documents, it's WTW page 15, slide 17 are your documents. He has a document there called Medicare Retirees Only. And this is very good because this shows that the surplus that the retirees are paying in premiums is $26 million in 25. 26, it's $69 million. And by 28, the excess billing is $110 million. That's over the cost of their services. Why, if you are going to increase premiums that much, are you now talking in your proposal for the future, which is, if you look at slide 17, I believe it's, disregard, it's slide 14, which is the WTW page 12. What Brian shows on this slide, and if you look down to about the fourth line, where it says premium contribution Medicare, he is proposing a 4.4% raise in premiums again and again and again in 28, so that the overcharge that he put in place is not $110 million, folks. It's $150 million for these people. Okay? Now that looks like an outrage to me. I look back at the minutes from the meetings, the previous meetings, and I never saw that this body voted to increase those premiums like that. Oh, and by the way, if you look back on his document, What does he do with the $150 million, $60 million? He takes those premiums and washes them back over the non-Medicare population. And that way he ends up with, on the right-hand side, you'll see
Pledge, you hit
zero.
time.
I'm sorry?
Thank you. You hit time. Your 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you
you.
for your time.
All right, next we have Stephen LePage.
Okay, do we have another
Yep.
public comment?
Alex LePage.
Okay,
It just authorized his microphone.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, my comments concern item number 8. Recently, retirees like myself went through a challenging experience with healthcare changes, and I'm sure members of the SCBC didn't find it easy either. We were given information about Medicare Advantage that, after digging deeper, turned out to be misleading. The rosy picture we were presented with wasn't the reality. I want to make it clear I'm not against technology or innovation, but we need full transparency and access to all the facts. I recently watched an interview promoting a new technology called Inside Tracker to manage diabetes, again portraying it as a game changer. While it may improve health outcomes, I have concerns about its broader implications, especially when it comes to reducing GHIP costs. For example, consider smoking. We reduce smoking due to its link to lung cancer, but a table I saw from NIH shows that while smoking risk declined, lung cancer rates have actually gone up. Factors like age and population growth played a much bigger role, and healthcare costs have continued to rise. In short, we improved the healthcare outcome for a specific risk, but we didn't translate it into lower expenses. This demonstrates that simply reducing risk doesn't always result in cost savings. So let's get specific. How much can we realistically expect to lower GHIP costs with this new technology? Will it lead to lower premiums for employees and retirees? How long will it take before we see these savings? In an interview I watched, when asked directly about this, the response seemed to indicate it would be immediate. There are points in the video that I agree with and others I disagree with. I have serious doubts about the specific claim regarding immediate savings. We need to fully understand the long-term impacts of these technologies before assuming they'll lead to cost reductions. While I believe healthcare outcomes could potentially improve, I'm concerned about the broader implications. Whether this will truly result in meaningful GHIP savings, however, remains highly uncertain. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Cade, I just want to let you know that we did get the Lieutenant Governor Hall Long online, and then Deputy State Treasurer Jordan Siemens, who's going to be sitting in as a non-voting member today. And I don't see any other hands raised. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment this morning? I don't see any other hands raised. I will turn it back over to you, Director Cade.
Welcome to our Deputy Treasurer and welcome to our Lieutenant Governor. So next up on the agenda is the Director's Report and the subcommittee updates. Faith, I'll turn it over to you.
Director Cade. Just a couple of brief updates for the committee this afternoon. The financial subcommittee met last Monday, the 16th, reviewed financial reporting as well as the fiscal year 25 group health insurance plan budget. All of that will be reviewed with the committee this afternoon. The one item that was discussed at last week's meeting will be further discussed with this committee at your October meeting, was a discussion on actuarial values for the non-Medicare health plans. So again, we'll resume that discussion with this committee next month. The Policy and Planning Subcommittee also met last Monday in the afternoon. They as well discussed a number of items on today's agenda. They also discussed some updates and follow-up questions from a discussion that we had with them earlier in the summer about the gene and cellular therapy landscape. Again, there were no takeaways or additional discussion at this time with the full committee. As well, there was a discussion about a potential enhancement to the Highmark non-Medicare virtual health program. We will continue discussion with that subcommittee in October on that topic and possibly bring a recommendation before this group at the October meeting. Just lastly, with regards to the Retiree Healthcare Benefits Advisory Subcommittee, that group last met in April. There was some discussion at that time about potentially reconvening the subcommittee in September. However, at this time, there are no scheduled dates for that group to meet again. Director Keith, that concludes my update.
All right. Does anybody have any question or discussion on the director's report? Okay. Hearing none. Let's move on to financials.
Thank you, Director Cade. It's Brian Stitzel from WTW. So let me share my screen.
How you doing, Brian?
Doing well, thanks. So we're going to first go through a second review of the FY25 budget. Same budget that was discussed and reviewed in August. My understanding is at the end of this particular section, we'll pause for a vote on approval for the budget, and then we can move on to the August financials and updated long-term projections. Recall that this budget is based on the updated trend assumption. That was my apologies. In a hospital. Is based on the updated trend assumption that was recently approved by the SEBC, which increased all of the medical trend assumptions 6% to 8% on the non-Medicare medical side, 3% to 5% on the medical side, and then the aggregate weighted pharmacy assumptions that take into account the expected significant GLP-1 utilization and cost into the near term future. While I won't review it, a rehash of the pharmacy trend is in this deck on slide 13. Specific to enrollments, there's a slight change in the budget process this year compared to what was done historically. Historically, we had assumed that on average, each fiscal year would have approximately a 1% increase in overall average enrollment over the prior year. We've been seeing greater than that over the past number of years, in excess of 2%. For budget purposes for FY25, we waited until we actually saw the July actual open enrollment results for FY25, use that as a starting point, and then have each month go up by that same 1% per annum. And you can see there's been shifts in enrollment by option from one option to the other, particularly for State Basic, as enrollment has gone up significantly over the past couple of years, including the CDH Gold, while on the flip side, HMO enrollment has gone down over the past couple of years. From a premium contribution standpoint, this reflects the 27% rate action that went into effect 7/1/24 for the non-Medicare population and 1/1/25, or midway through FY25 for the Medicare population. You can see that there are certain cells here that are highlighted in a dark brown background with white font. That's just simply to show that while those premium contribution increases went into effect at the beginning of either the fiscal year or the calendar year, in terms of how those premium contributions come into the fund itself, they come in generally on a lag basis for certain groups. So, for example, active state employees, each month there are 2 payroll cycles and therefore 2 premium deductions, but it happens basically 1 cycle in arrears. So we only see half of that 27% rate increase reflected in the fund in July, and then the full amount by the time we get to August. On the pensioner side, the state share of pensioner contributions are lagged a month. So for example, the amounts that hit the fund in July are actually for June, and the amounts that hit in August are for July. Therefore, there's a 1 month lag on the state share of that component, reflecting the 27% increase. Whereas on the pensioner side, the amount that the pensioners pay, those amounts are actually current. So July is in July, August in August, so forth and so on. On the non-payroll groups, it's sort of a mixed bag. Some groups are paid in arrears, meaning they're paying July and August and September, et cetera, and then some are current. And there are actually maybe 1 or 2 that pay in advance, but the lion's share of that group is the University of Delaware, more than 2/3 of the total. And the University of Delaware pays 1 month in arrears. So for simplicity, we assume a 1 month lag on the non-payroll groups. But in total, generally reflecting the 27% rate action that went into effect for FY25, which is why you see the increase in premium contributions going from $990 million to roughly $1.3 billion. From an other revenue standpoint, there were significant changes that are happening.
Sean,
yeah.
Brian, hold on 1 second.
Oh,
Sean,
I'm sorry.
see,
Sean, you have
Sean's
a
got his
question?
hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick question, Brian. I just want to make sure I just want to clarify something. So if you go back to that slide 4,
Yeah.
So when we look at the premium contributions for FY25 budget for Medicare, am I reading this right? When you sort of take the state share and the pensioner share together, I guess the pensioner share is about 5% of the total. Does that sound right?
On the Medicare side, that's generally true, except that there are a significant portion of state Medicare retirees, I think it's in excess of 60%, that don't contribute at all. I forget the exact date. It's 2011 or 2012, I believe, is when the 5% state share went into effect. And then there are actually a very small handful of retirees who pay on top of the 5% share a growing percentage if they had significantly fewer years of service at retirement. But those counts are very, very small. On average, in total, when you aggregate all of those 3 things together, it comes out to about 5% on average.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Again, from another revenue standpoint, somewhat significant changes from prior to FY25 into FY25. On the EGWP side, you can see, for example, in the columns that are specifically related to the EGWP are the direct subsidy, the federal reinsurance, the year-end reconciliation, which is just a byproduct of those other things, and then the coverage gap discount. And you can see where the direct subsidy is jumping significantly starting in calendar 25, going up from about $500,000 a month to more than $3.5 million a month. On the flip side, the federal reinsurance, we have specific slides for each of the components, so I'll get into them in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. The federal reinsurance component's going down from roughly $2 million to a little bit less than $1 million. And that's part a real decrease and then part just a shift between the current monthly, the prospective monthly payments and the year-end reconciliation. And then the coverage gap discount goes down a little bit. It's about a 97% decrease. But net overall, all of that combined, the Inflation Reduction Act generally significantly increased the revenues in total that we're expected to get as part of the EGWP. So that's a positive thing from a GHIP standpoint. Specifically, you can see here the direct subsidy is a way to look at the direct subsidy is call it the current funding from the government into the various gap components not covered by Medicare Part D. And for for calendar 2024, that amount is estimated at $17 per member per month. And you can see for calendar 2025, the actual amount that the GHIP will be getting is $118 a month. So that's the cause for the big increase from the $500,000 to the $3.6 million. That's a good news for the GHIP. With respect to the federal reinsurance component, so coverage in the catastrophic phase, two things are happening. One is the PMPM is going down significantly from the $91 you see here down to $62. But additionally, the reinsurance component is split into two pieces. There's a prospective piece that you simply get based on heads each month. And then at the end of the year, or really 12 to 15 months after the end of the year, there's a full reconciliation done. And that's what makes up that year-end reconciliation payment. And you can see that the prospective payment had been running at about 75% of the total expected $91, which would lead to a net reconciliation portion. Going forward, that prospective payment out of the $62 was reduced more as a percentage. So roughly getting about half of that, 49% of that, on a prospective basis. So you can see down in the footnotes, the prospective payment was reduced from $71.09 in 2024 down to $30.41 for 2025. So the GHIP will be getting less upfront in terms of share of that lower number, but then a much higher share when the year-end reconciliation happens. So at the beginning of 2027, that 12 to 15 months after the close of the year, the GHIP currently estimated to get a much higher year-end reconciliation payment, currently at roughly $11.5 million. So lots of changes on the ins and outs of the pieces in the EGWP. And then the coverage gap discount payment, relatively benign from 24 to 25, a slight decrease, about 96% of where it was from an $89 PEPM down to $85. But again, the net of those three things is a somewhat significant increase in the revenues into the GHIP from the state due to the EGWP. From a claim standpoint, again, claims are up year over year, projected to be up year over year based on the updated trend assumption that was approved by the SEBC. So again, it was an increase from 6% to 8% for the non-Medicare medical side, 3% to 5% for the Medicare population, and then recall that varied trend assumption on the pharmacy side, which takes more of a component build to the trend, looking at GLP-1 spend, prudent RX savings, and then expected rebates, and then the expectation that the GLP-1 utilization and cost will start to grade down over time over the next few years. So all of that baked into the claim forecast. Now you might ask, okay, if it's 8% for non-Medicare medical, why are we seeing, you can see at the bottom, we have year over year total increases in total claims, and you see 10.6%. That's because it's not just the trend in claims, but also the increase in the growth in enrollment. So those two components actually lead to claims coming in higher than the trend assumption on average year over year. So overall net, you can see down in the lower right, we're forecasting FY25 claims to be about 14.4% higher than FY24, or growth from 1.2 billion to about 1.4 billion. From an expense standpoint, for budget purposes, we assume that all expense components are going up by inflation, and an inflation factor of 3%, and then any particular expense component that is also driven by enrollment counts, it's really that 3% plus the growth of enrollment year over year. So in total, forecasting expenses to go up from 48.5 million to 50.8 million, roughly about 3%. Sean, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. The 3% of inflation assumption, and where do you grab that from?
It's just nothing other than an arbitrary assumption relative to generally administrative expenses go up by inflation. Certain expenses are salary related. So it's just an estimate of inflation.
What's been the inflationary trend over the last few years?
No, I guess I'm asking, is that that's projected inflation, the projected inflation rate in the economy for the next year?
No, it's just it's meant to represent an inflationary type increase, but it is not tied to any CPI component specifically.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
I guess my question is, should it be more closely attached to the healthcare inflation number?
Director Kate, they generally don't have any tie to healthcare inflation because it's an expense component, not a healthcare component.
Right. Okay.
So it's really just the added inflationary cost of administering a program. I mean, we could certainly tie it to a CPI type of a base.
No,
check what that's. I'm sorry, Director Kate, you had a comment?
No, I said no, it just gives us some insight as to what goes into it.
Okay. And then a phasing of the budget overall. A couple things to point out here. You can see in the middle of the chart that the fund is actually expected to go negative again early in the year, but turns to a positive cash balance beginning in November and would end all of the things coming in as expected would end FY25 with roughly a $66 million cash surplus and roughly $34 million after reserves. That is perfectly fine as long as the fund does not end the year. It's okay for it to go negative during the year. And this also reflects the expectation that the $7.3 million that was transferred from OMB into the fund at the end of 24 to keep the fund in a positive cash balance standpoint will be paid back by the end of this month. And that's the end of the FY25 budget. Are there any other questions from the group? So hearing none, Chief Justice Seitz, you have a question?
Yeah, one question is, what are your assumptions on GLP-1s for the budget?
Sure. So that's built into the trend assumption. You can see here, you see there are two rows. So we have the trend assumption for pharmacy split between the two groups, between commercial and EGWP, just because A, they're different populations, and B, GLP-1s for weight loss are not covered under the EGWP, whereas they are covered under the commercial plan. But you can see here, we have the two components split between diabetes use and weight loss. Weight loss wasn't covered at all until FY24, so there was this $14.2 million spend. And if you recall back to last month when we talked about the trend assumption, we were looking at some fairly hefty month over month increases in utilization, and then we ultimately waited to see how July actually came in, and July came in significantly greater than June again. And so we built a building block approach where we had that monthly trend going, sort of winnowing down over the year, leveling off to, I think, a flat 4% by the end of FY25, I'm sorry. But overall, we have this very large expected spike in GLP-1 use from 14 million to almost 53 million on the weight loss side, 25 million to 33, and then those annual increases for purposes of long-term projections, not FY25 budget, but for purposes of long-term projections, the overall annual increase in GLP-1 spend starting to come down and lower. But you can see fairly big increases in the expected GLP-1 utilization and cost in FY25 versus FY24.
And do you think those assumptions are reasonable? Because
Yeah, let me
Yep.
pull up the trend presentation from
and I'm
last
sorry if I've gotten
month.
you out of order here.
No, it's perfectly fine. So here are the GLP-1 utilization statistics for weight loss. So this is the commercial population. Again, FY24 was the first year that it was covered. Started off at $400,000 a month. And you can see relatively slower type upticks early in the year and then just significant increases month over month, almost a 50% increase in 1 month. And then another 45 on top of that, another 30, 23, 6. We had an initial trend assumption that was actually a little bit lower than what you see at the bottom here, which was the final recommendation. And then when we saw actual July came in another 21% higher than June. So we raised this trend assumption even higher than the initial recommendation, where we're assuming August is 15% higher than July, 10% September over August, et cetera, and then a somewhat decent amount of leveling off. Is it possible that this trend assumption is not enough? It's possible. As alarming as that may sound, it's possible. If you look over here to the right of the exhibit, we have graphs showing sort of the increases running through FY25 on a monthly basis and then annual year over year. It's still some pretty significant increases. Again, it doesn't mean that actual experience couldn't come in worse than this. But it seems like for now that we're at a fairly reasonable place, coupled with the fact that we do have a margin built into a claim fluctuation margin built into our budget to help protect from some of those potential fluctuations in experience.
Brian, is there any insight into whether these are going to be approved for additional indications that might expand their use?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure of that. Let me take that back to the pharmacy team and see if there are other indications in the docket relative to the GLP-1s. I know there are many other newer types of GLP-1s that are in trial phases that may wind up replacing this, call it first generation type of drugs, which may ultimately lead to higher costs, but I don't think any of those are in the near-term pipeline. But we can check and see if there are other indications that these might be used for. I mean, ultimately, too, the goal is that the usage of the GLP-1s will lead to lowering other comorbidities and lead to healthier people, but I think we're still quite a ways out from truly understanding the financial ramifications of that, hopefully to the positive. And just real quick, similarly, we did the same thing on the diabetes side, seeing relatively lower trends just because GLP-1s for diabetes were already covered. So it was already in the base. But again, we did see a pretty hefty 12% increase on the diabetes side in July as well. So continued spikes in utilization on both the weight loss and diabetes treatment side. So hearing no other questions, Director Cade, should I turn it back over to you for a vote on approval of the budget?
Sure. Hearing Brian's presentation, I would accept a motion to approve the FY25 budget.
So moved.
Is there any discussion on the motion before I go to a request for second? And again, we're This is just voting on the budget itself. All right, hearing none, do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the FY25 budget. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to the August fund results. So for the month of August, in total, actuals were about $3.5 million worse than budget, predominantly due to the fact you can see that claims were about $7.5 million higher than budget, but that was expected. When budget was set by month, it turned out that actual July had an extra week's invoice in it versus the expectation, and therefore August had one less week's invoice. So we were expecting August claims to come in better than budget. Premium contributions were about $1 million off state active employee side. So we're digging into that a little bit as the July numbers came in as expected. Other revenues were about $1.5 million lower than budget due to a lower than budgeted commercial rebate. And then expenses were about $1.3 million worse than budget due to a $1.3 million shared savings fee from Highmark. You can see at the bottom the full yearly forecast is currently expected to be about $1.5 million off budget, with claims and other revenues right now just about on to the dollar. And really the big piece coming out of that, again, that $1.3 million shared savings fee from Highmark that wasn't anticipated in the budget. Same budget we just showed in the budget presentation, again highlighting that the $7.3 million is expected to be paid back in September. From a premium contribution standpoint, again, you can see I have circled the primary driver for about the $1 million shortfall to budget coming from the state employee side, both on, you would assume, coming from both the state share and the employee share being lower than expected. May be somewhat of a lag. We're digging into that a little bit just to make sure that we're okay in our forecast going forward. From another revenue standpoint, you can see that the Q4 FY24 rebate payment that was just received in August came in at $25.6 million versus $27.6 million anticipated. Don't necessarily expect that trend to continue, but again, something else that we'll continue to keep an eye on going forward. Claims standpoint, claims both in July and August in total came in almost exactly on budget. You can see, again, I've circled the Highmark numbers because the Highmark budget assumed one less weekly invoice in July, when in reality, July had one more weekly invoice, and then the flip side of that occurred in August. But net, the two add up very close to budget. So we're trending well from a claim standpoint. Expenses, again, circled the $4.9 million total program and ASO fees coming in higher than the $3.4 million expected, again, due to that $1.3 million unanticipated shared savings fee from Highmark. All other expenses came in relatively close to budget, with consulting fees coming in significantly lower than budget for August, but higher than budget for July. It's just a blippy thing based on what services are done in any particular month. Enrollment, again, recall from a budget standpoint, enrollment uses the actual July from a starting standpoint. You can see off to the right here what the total expectations are for budget. August came in just about right on budget, about 40 lives different. And then just a snapshot of the fund. So again, generally positive results for July and August combined, tracking fairly closely to FY25 budget, which is a positive. So from a long-term projection standpoint, right now we're showing only showing scenarios that show the smoothed rate action increases forecasted over the next 3 fiscal years, FY26 through FY28. And the reason for that, and any type of scenario can be done, is that as of now, because of the 27% rate increase and the changes in anticipated revenues from the EGWIP, FY26, again, all other things being equal, results coming in as expected, in a single year rate action scenario would have a 0% needed rate action to satisfy the needed surplus after reserves. But then the 2 out years, FY27 and FY28, would have much higher rate increases in the 8, 9, 10% per year standpoint. So as of now, we're showing a smooth approach where we would actually put through a rate increase in FY26 instead of 0 in exchange for lower out years. So as of now, with results through August, that rate increase would be 4.4% across the entire GHIP covered population. Again, noting that certain subpopulations, which we'll look at in a second, meaning active employees alone, pre-65 retirees alone, and Medicare retirees alone, their experience against the gross premium rates might produce individual deficits or surpluses. But for now, the entire GHIP is rated as one big experience pool, and therefore would need an average 4.4% increase per year for the next 3 years to wind up at the end of FY28 with the $0 deficit after reserves, with surpluses in each of the years leading up to FY28. If we looked at each population independently, as if their premium rates were set uniquely, separately for active employees, pre-65 retirees and Medicare retirees, the active population, their rate actions, that same 4.4% that we see here per year, would increase slightly to 5% per year. And that 5% rate action would result in a range of employee contributions increasing from a low of $2 per month up to a high of about $20 per month. On average, active employees in those contributions pay about 11% of the total share of state costs. So the overwhelming share of these gross premium contributions are funded by the state, not by employees. From a pre-65 retiree standalone basis, you can see that their independent individual rate actions would jump significantly from that same 4.4% up to just about 18% per year for each of the 3 years. You can see on their own, their experience would produce a deficit using the current premium funding rates. So would need that roughly 18% per year to wind up with that same $0 deficit after reserves by the end of FY28. In total, pre-65 retirees contribute about 12% of the total premium contribution cost, and that 18% increase would mean that pre-65 retiree contributions would go up by a range of $8 on the low end to $74 on the high end. So roughly 4 times what the active employee contributions would increase by. And then from a standalone Medicare population standpoint, there would not be any rate action that would be needed for 3 years. You can see, to Mr. Pledgey's comments, this group, based on the premium contributions, would generate about $110 million surplus by the end of FY28. Although it's important, I think, to note that roughly 95% of this total surplus is generated by state contributions, or said a different way, Medicare retirees pay on average about 5% of the total.
Yeah, so the premium contribution, 95% of that, I guess FY 25, $192 million is, 95% of that is state general fund
That's
contribution.
right. That's right.
And then the other revenues would be the, rebate from, Medicare.
Rebates from the manufacturers
manufacturers,
on the
rather.
prescription drug plan, and then yes,
Right.
the funding components out of the government into the EGWP, the direct subsidy, the reinsurance, the catastrophic coverage funded by the federal government into the EGWP. That's right. So those are what the long-term forecast would look like if it was decided to change the rating methodology from one aggregate fund and pool into three separate rating classes: active employees, pre-65 retirees, and Medicare retirees. Let me pause there. Go ahead, Director Kate.
And so really, I mean, what you're looking at is, that significant rebates that we receive via the Medicare retiree program is essentially smoothing out a lot of our rate actions.
That is definitely true. Helpful in the increases in those components in terms of the expected revenues year over year. We don't show the FY24 amounts, but I think they were roughly, I think it was $230 million. So a very big increase in these other revenue components going into FY25, or more specifically, really going into calendar 2025.
Right. Okay. Are there any questions related to the long-term projections, or are you done? Or is this the last slide that you have for long-term?
Yep, that's it. That's it.
Are there any questions, Chief Justice Seitz?
Director Kate, just as a question, if you take last year's budget as a percent of that budget, what is the percentage of the healthcare spend?
Of the total healthcare spend, you'll be looking at, average about 600 plus million to group health insurance. We sent another 60 plus million or 50 plus million to the OPEB liability. And then maybe I think it's another 8 million from payroll. I mean, you're talking about close to $700 million. And that's just back of the napkin. That doesn't include some of the other benefits on the Medicaid side that we spend as well, which is over $1 billion.
I just wanted to get, because I know the governor had made a comment, I think during his last financial presentation, that the amount of healthcare spend as a percentage of the budget was getting extreme. So I was just
what I just gave you off the back on the back of the napkin is just under $2 billion out of a $6 billion budget, and that includes Medicaid, state general fund Medicaid spending as well, and that does not include that's just general fund. That doesn't include the other ASF generated revenues, as well as the federal assistance that we receive from Medicaid also. So yeah, just under $2 billion. So it's about a third of our budget. All right. Okay, Brian, are we doing the, are we at the fund report?
We just went through the
We just
fund
went through
report,
that
so
one.
we're
Okay.
done with the financials. So we're on to item 6. I'm not sure if that's Jacqueline or Michelle.
Thanks, Brian. I'll take it from here. Good afternoon,
Okay.
everyone. Jacqueline Iglesias with WTWO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. So we're going to go through the next 2 items, starting with the life insurance request for proposal. We're going to review some key updates and points of feedback that were reflected from the committee at the August meeting. So we'll hit the high points today on some of that content. And then I believe this item and the next one are marked for consideration of a potential vote by the committee during today's meeting. So specifically starting with the life insurance benefit, again, this is largely going to be a recap of the presentation that we walked through in August. We'll focus on some updated information, including some follow-ups requested by a committee member at our last meeting on benchmark participation rates for employees in a completely voluntary, or said differently, 100% employee pay all life insurance benefit, as well as finally pausing on, requesting a decision from the committee on the scope of services that would be included in the upcoming life insurance RFP. So moving to the first slide with content, here's just a brief overview of the proposed scope of services for a life insurance RFP. These include matching the current life insurance benefits that the state offers to eligible employees today, which is focused on group universal life. It's a particular type of life product. That's option 1. Option 2 is continuing to offer group universal life, but weaving in some additional benefit enhancements for both employee and spouse life coverage options. Then options 3 and 4 are a bit of a riff on that. Instead of offering a group term or group universal life policy, options 3 and 4 are centered around offering a group term life product to employees. One that is consistent with the plan provisions that are currently in place, such as the maximum coverage amount, but of course offering a group term life product instead of group universal. And then that's option 3. And then option 4 would be similarly offering group term life to employees, but with some additional enhancements similar to what was outlined in option 2. The key update I want to highlight here, if we look at the bullet point at the bottom of the chart, we talked last time about the statewide benefits office preparing to survey employees on their preferences with respect to the difference between offering a group universal life or group term life, with the survey being targeted for release in early March of next year. From our meeting last time, several committee members expressed an interest in having input into what the survey questionnaire looked like before it was released to employees. So we've just acknowledged here that that upcoming survey would be completed, or I should say would be prepared with input from committee members prior to its release. The next couple of slides, I'm not going to go through the details of this, really just highlights in much further detail the different options that would be outlined in an upcoming life RFP. These were also further described in a separate document that committee members received as part of your materials packet, which was a written description of the scope of services that would be potentially included in this upcoming RFP. I do want to highlight on slide 9 some feedback we received from committee members at our last meeting. I mentioned the desire that several committee members voiced around providing input into the development of the employee survey that is targeted for release in the first quarter of calendar year next year. I did want to also note one committee member offered several comments about the choice between including a group term life series of options for potential bidders to quote on in the upcoming RFP. And that particular committee member reaffirmed their support for Group Universal Life and continued to see a tremendous value in the cash value account portion of that Group Universal Life product. The desire to have the state do some more promotion and advertisement of those cash value accounts, one to really help educate members on the benefits of investing in a tax deferred account such as them. This member also affirmed that they did not see value in changing coverage to a group term life insurance product and has not yet been convinced of the value in doing so in any of these conversations at the committee or subcommittee level. And then finally, just expressed the belief that if the state were to move to offering a group term life insurance product to replace group universal life, then employees would potentially begin shopping for life insurance in the private market. So again, these were the comments that we received from our last meeting that we wanted to make sure were documented and part of the record for today's conversation as well. The remainder of the document is additional detail about the remaining options in the potential scope of services. Before I pause for questions, discussion from committee members, I do just want to highlight in the appendix, this is again requested from a committee member at our last meeting, looking for benchmark information on the participation rates in other employee populations that have a voluntary life insurance benefit offering. So this data came from the Willis Towers Watson 2021 Emerging Trends in Healthcare Survey. This is a survey we conduct annually and focuses on voluntary benefits such as voluntary life insurance about once every 3 years. So this is the most recent data that we have available. And in the chart below, we list several different types of life insurance products offered on a voluntary basis. So again, employee pay all, much like the state of Delaware offers to employees today, with the average enrollment rates for these different types of life products. And while the specific group universal life insurance product was not included in the survey, we do have information on group term life insurance, as well as individual permanent life insurance, which is a type of universal life coverage. And you can see the state's current group universal life participation rate of about 34% of benefits eligible employees is pretty much right in the middle between group term life insurance enrollment rates and individual permanent life insurance enrollment rates when all are offered on a voluntary basis. So just to kind of pause on any questions, commentary from committee members, further discussion of this proposed scope of services. Mr. Bracken, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I recall in the last meeting and I saw it in one of the slides here, that WTW's recommendation would be to, if we go to term life, to only offer the term life and not give the employees the options. So what we would be doing is moving people who are currently in a group universal life plan who would want to stay in it. If we go in the other direction, then they're going to have no say. They're going to be forced into the term life insurance. Is that accurate?
I would amend that slightly. So for the people who are currently in the group universal life product and want to retain their group universal life coverage, there is a mechanism for them to elect an option which basically allows them to convert their coverage from the state's group plan. If that plan were to terminate, those people could still port their coverage. So that basically means continue to purchase the same type of group universal life product, but it would be priced higher than the current group rates that the state offers today. And the reason why it would be priced higher is because it would be then underwritten with the insurance carriers. They call it their ported pool of employees or of plan participants who have also elected to remain in that group universal life option. So it is a possibility for people to keep their plan at an additional cost if they wanted to do so and not convert to a group term life product.
Okay, I guess kind of what I'm looking at here is this is almost like we could be stepping into a similar quicksand that went on with Medicare Advantage, in that we have a retiree population that is, happy with their group universal life that they've had their entire career and into their retirement, and to change it, and then they'd have to be somewhat on their own to go out into the marketplace and find similar coverage at a higher rate. Is that accurate? If they wanted to keep what they had, they'd have to kind of do it on their own.
So there are, yes, for a portion of the retired population. There is a portion of those who are no longer part of the state's employee population, whether they separated because of retirement or because of a job change, who were allowed to port their plan and remain partially covered under the state's group universal life program and partially covered under the insurance carrier's group rates. So there would be that portion of coverage that is still under the state's group universal life program that would be at a higher rate. And then similarly, there's a separate group of separated employees, again, retirees or people who left the employment under the state, and they would also be part of the group plan. So essentially, yes, there would be instances where people would be looking at a choice of keeping their current coverage at a higher cost or moving into a different type of life product if the state were to choose to implement group term life as the option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sean?
Yeah, thank you. Just two things. One, I'd just like to point out, like for slide 4, you had mentioned that the survey would be done with input from the SEBC. I am the person who sort of raised this issue last time, and specifically I was asking about input from the proposal review committee. I believe that's reflected in the minutes for the meeting. So I wasn't necessarily looking for the SEBC itself to have input into and review the survey. I just wanted to make sure the proposal review committee was involved in that. So just to clarify. And then a question about on the benchmarking. So the pool of employers in your data set, would that is that sort of broadly private and public employers?
That's correct, yes.
And is there any reason to believe there might be differences in take-up rates in amongst employees and public employers versus at private employers? What I'm asking is, so could public employees behave differently than private employees? Is there some reason to believe that they might behave differently when it comes to taking up a benefit like life insurance?
That's a great question, Sean, and I don't have a concise answer to provide at this point in time. I'm certainly happy to take that back as a follow-up and dig further into some of the data, but offhand, I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Jacqueline, it's Faith Rents. If I could just comment on Mr. Brian's first comment about the survey and the reference to the SEBC. My recollection at last month's meeting is to the extent that the proposal review committee has been selected by the SEBC, we certainly would bring them into the development of that employee survey. I think we were looking at it more broadly that it would be the SEBC and or the proposal review committee, depending on the timing, but we certainly don't want to delay on working through a survey process while there's potential changes occurring at both the SEBC membership that could impact the selection of the review committee. So we can certainly address that when the time comes in the first quarter of next year, but certainly want to make sure that committee members have the opportunity either themselves or through a review committee designee to weigh in on the development of those questions.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. So, Jacqueline, I just need clarity on what we would be asking members of the SEBC to vote on right now. We would just be voting on the scope of the RFP proposal that the subcommittee has put together with options 1 through 4. I guess my question, which kind of piggybacks on Mr. Brackens. Was the issue of kind of portability of existing plans, is that a part of this conversation when it comes to options? Is that something that can be clarified in the RFP? Or is it just a foregone conclusion that individuals who currently have the GUL will have to transition to this new plan?
So the issue of portability really comes into play if the committee were to award a contract for a group term life insurance product for employees in the next, as a result of this RFP process, or if there were any, well, let me just stop there, because the two group universal life options are either matching the current plan today or enhancing it.
Gotcha.
So there wouldn't necessarily be, a rationale for somebody wanting to port their current coverage when they're potentially getting better. So yes, so under options 3 or 4, we can certainly affirm that in the scope of services, the portability question has been one that has already been asked of the incumbent group universal life carrier, Securian, and that option exists for plan participants today. So there would be no reason to expect that that would not continue. That's a standard part of industry practice for life insurance carriers to offer that portability provision.
Tom, I don't know, your screen looks like you're trying to come out of mute. Did you have something else to add?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how we would, tell our members and the people that we're representing that, they're in a plan and they're going to be forced into, if we make the change, they're going to get forced into something different. And I guess maybe I just haven't listened, but I haven't heard. I know that the treasurer had some reservations. I know that the insurance commissioner had some reservations. So I guess I'd be more comfortable even voting on the scope of work if I had their information on why they believe, if I have both of their opinions correct, why they believe that the universal life is better than the term life. Because I know that they were specifically discussing that, and I guess as far as this committee goes, they both have more experience in this area than maybe the rest of us. So that's just a concern that I have is, I would like to hear from them why they feel the way they feel as it relates to the group universal life versus the term life.
Okay. I don't know if we have our insurance commissioner, or I know the deputy treasurer is on.
So Ron, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Well, this is something that I've contemplated for a while. I mean, quite frankly, most states use a term life sort of plan. It's just easier to manage. However, the group universal life plan is a better option if people can afford it. So I don't, and forgive me because I've missed a few meetings, but I don't understand why we can't offer both. Because if you can afford the universal life, it can build up cash value. It can help you in the future. It could potentially pay in a traditional policy if you can't pay your premiums, right? That cash value. So when in a term life, people typically buy that because they have a mortgage or they have children in college, or they want to leave something for their loved ones should they pass early. So I don't see why, and perhaps this was discussed, so forgive me, but why we can't have both options.
Yeah, and I don't think we're saying that it was one option over the other. This would just be to look at the scope. Now, Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong. Options 1 and 2 are basically the existing universal life programs that we would be that kind of matches our current benefit.
Right. So option 1 matches the current life insurance benefit that you have today. Option 2 is still group universal life, but it would just be enhancing several key, plan provisions themselves.
And so I'm sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
So that's essentially option 1 and 2. I have one other comment about something the insurance commissioner mentioned, but Director Kate, I think I cut you off.
No, I cut you off. I apologize. The question that I was asking was related to when we submit these RFP requests, is there anything that would prevent a respondent from saying, okay, we could offer you options 1 or options 2 and 3 and 4, or can we request, if possible, that, as the insurance commissioner just mentioned, that respondents be able to provide or would get extra bonus points for being able to respond and provide options, 3, 2, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So the current way that the statement of services were written is that it's requesting vendors can provide, they can quote on options 1 through 4.
Mhm.
I think what perhaps you're getting at and what the insurance commissioner was getting at too is, can you offer options 1 and 3, right? So group universal and group term life as binary choices that the employee gets to make. There's
Correct.
nothing preventing you from doing that. And you could certainly contemplate writing the requested scope of services to reflect that. We had put in a recommendation to consider offering one as a replacement for the other and not both alongside of each other, mainly as a way to consolidate the purchasing power that you have for your population to help
Yeah.
secure the best possible rates
Best rate,
for
yeah.
one or the other. That doesn't mean you can't write
Yeah.
it so that it's requesting both alongside of each other. I will say it would make it challenging for the bidders to be able to make certain underwriting assumptions that would allow them to put
Both
guaranteed rates in place.
Right. Tom, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think it was mentioned the first time we were discussing this, but I don't remember. Can't find it in my notes. But Jacqueline, do you have any idea how many of our active employees are enrolled in the life insurance and how many of our retired employees maintained the life insurance when they went into retirement?
That's a very good question. I can start and would just ask that the SBO please weigh in here as well. From our earlier conversations, I believe that it was not something that was easily extractable from the data that is maintained by the insurance carrier based on the way the state's eligibility data comes over, to be able to parse out who were the actives and who were the retirees. But SBO team, please correct me if I misstated that.
Jacqueline, I believe Leanne is trying to pull numbers and to answer that question, so I'll let her weigh in.
Yeah, I'm looking, Jacqueline. I believe you're correct, but let me see what I can find.
We can take their questions while Leanne's looking for that information.
Do you have any other questions? Sean?
Dr. K.
Oh,
This is Deputy Treasurer Siemens. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Bracken's comments.
oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think the one slide reflected the state treasurer's opinions about her feelings with the group universal life insurance. Her position remains that the RFP should solely be for group universal life, and that term should not be considered at all, considering the tremendous values that are provided with group universal life insurance, including the cash value accounts, which, as reflected on the slide, indicates that we think the state could do could continue to promote what a cash value account is and what it can mean for any participant. So that's where the state treasurer believes the state should go.
Okay. Thank you. Sean, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so do we know anything about them? So among the actives who were in the group Universal Life, do we know anything about who they are? Like, do we have any descriptive statistics that would give us a better sense as to which employees or which kinds of employees have chosen to purchase the group Universal Life?
Mr. O'Brien, this is Faith Renz. I believe our information is limited to the multiples of salary that they would be enrolled in. I don't believe we have salary information or like employer information. But I'm looking to Leanne to see if she could verify that as well. I'm not sure we have anything that we could provide today. We have to follow it back up.
Okay. I want to keep the term life in here. I understand, the number of the committee members have said that they believe the group Universal Life provides better value. I think there are trade-offs there. I don't, I haven't heard anybody sort of describe why they think it provides better value. I think the Commissioner Navarro's statement about I think some issues around the sort of pricing and affordability are, certainly things to be concerned about. And that's partly why I'm asking this question about who's actually purchasing it. I think, having a group product generally, because of significant value to employees, makes it easier, certainly makes it easier to purchase. If having a term option would get more, allow more people to easily buy insurance, I'd be interested in that. But, I think we certainly need to know more. But I definitely would be interested in having the RFP continue to ask about both the group Universal Life and term life. Thanks.
So it sounds like there is some desire to at least create some open door for respondents to provide options and responses. I don't hear anything that's making it mandatory that they have to if they can't make it work, but I'm getting the vibe that folks would like to make sure that respondents have the opportunity to provide some options for us to play around with. Is that fairly accurate, Sean? And Insurance Commissioner Navarro?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah, from my perspective.
Okay. Is there, will the members of SCBC, can we vote on this now with that caveat? And, maybe we can touch base prior to the RFP going out.
Director Cates, Secretary Manning has a comment to make.
Yep.
Good morning, Director. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Wow. Sorry, it's been a day already. So I think from my perspective, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear, we are just voting on having these options as part of the RFP so that the bidders can submit their bids with 1, 2, 3, or 4. While a particular bidder might decide they don't want to bid all 4, or they might just want to bid 1 or 2, but we're just providing options for the RFP. So, my position is I don't think anybody's prepared to exclude any of these 4 options. So I would make a motion to move forward on these 4 options.
Okay.
I'd second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? Chief Justice Seitz?
Yeah, I've just got a question for the WTW folks. I think what I heard you saying was the way you package this might be confusing to people that are submitting bids. So are we confusing people by what we are proposing right now, and will we not get the bids that we're looking for?
So I think we would just want to clarify whether there is any desire to allow bidders to offer more than one option alongside of another. I did hear that feedback in some of the dialogue today. I think if we could also get that clarified, that would, because I think having more than one option alongside of another could be challenging for bidders to quote on without having a sense of what expected enrollment for each option might look like. So they might be unwilling to quote on firm pricing until enrollment happens, is the consequence of not having clear enrollment expectations, which I think is a little bit difficult when we're talking about potentially changing or offering a new choice of a different product alongside of the current group Universal Life.
In other words, if you have an offer that says offer A and B, you might be splitting the pool of people who want coverage such that it's less economical to offer one than the other, and that makes it hard to bid.
Correct. And hard to predict what proportion of the population is going to roll in option A versus B without knowing what those enrollment rates look like.
So I think I'm just raising a concern with what we're proposing here. I think it requires a little more thought if we're going to say offer both, because I don't think it's just as simple as saying offer both because of the economics that the bidders have to undertake to decide what the population is that would be in each pool, and it's just hard to price.
Okay.
But yeah, if I can, this is Josette again. And I apologize because now I'm a little confused. So my understanding was we have these 4 potential options and they would each require a different economic analysis for sure. But that would help us, determine the pros and cons and actually weigh the costs and benefits of these different options. And a bidder could conceivably determine which to bid on, and maybe they don't bid on all 4. And I guess that's problematic if nobody bids on any of it. So, but I mean, I'm assuming we could put verbiage in the RFP to get at some mix of these things. I don't know. I feel like trying to make a decision on term or universal before we issue the RFP and before we've issued a survey is a mistake. And maybe it's, I don't want to extend things. I know we are on a year amendment extension, but I guess I'm viewing the RFP sort of as if it's not successful because the bidders don't give us what we need, that wouldn't be a good thing, obviously, but we can rebid if that happens. But I think, I don't know, and maybe somebody can help me understand this, but if we're asking them to bid these things, do we really don't think that people will submit bids for all of them?
If I may, the potential complication isn't the choice of just submitting a bid for options 1, 2, 3, and or 4. It would be now submit a bid for options 1 and 3 simultaneously side by side, and that's where the complicating factor potentially comes into play.
All right.
Jacqueline,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, could we consider a scenario where the scope of work asks the bidders to price the different options if it was the only plan offered, and then a second pricing scenario where there's multiple plans offered?
We could.
And this is maybe a ridiculous thought, but I mean, how would it be different if we issue two different RFPs, one for options 1 and 2 and one for options 3 and 4?
I was thinking about that too.
It would be the same. I mean,
well, at times with fully insured products like these, the insurance carriers from time to time will put in underwriting requirements or caveats saying that their bids are contingent on, for instance, this particular product being the only offering to a given population. And I think that's where it potentially complicates what they're quoting on, or how they would price their quote if they knew they weren't the only bidder or plan option to be made available. We can certainly write the RFP that way. I'm just advising that there could potentially be complications with either the questions that might come back as a result of the ask, or in the caveats like included with the underwriting of the quote.
Okay, that makes sense. But so then I guess my follow-up question to that would be, in the interest of time and moving this process forward, is someone advocating for term life? I mean, is there been some request to look at term life versus the universal that everybody seems happy with?
The subcommittees made the recommendation for the SEBC to consider including a group term life product in the RFP, given the relatively narrow marketplace of insurance carriers that currently underwrite group universal life. There's only 3 in the market that do this. And given the fact that the last time the group universal life program was put through an RFP process for the state of Delaware was approximately 10 years ago. So from that basis, the subcommittees desired to, or recommended that the committee consider group term life as well.
And I'm going to ask another silly question. I apologize. I don't know a ton about how life insurance works. I just care of my husband by sending him a text. He now thinks I'm plotting to kill him. But what I am curious about is, how is what we currently have, group universal life, different from term, when I know as a state employee what I carry has no cash benefit. It essentially works as a term policy. So what is the difference?
So I would say that the biggest difference from a state employee's perspective, it comes down to the cash value account that is a component of group universal life products and is an offering alongside, or is an offering as part of the current group universal life plan. This cash value account is a tax deferred account that current life insurance plan participants can make additional premium contributions to, and the cash value of that account is guaranteed to grow at a minimum interest rate of 4%. So it's another tax deferred savings vehicle that current plan participants have the option of tapping into under the group universal life plan today. And that would not exist in a group term policy.
Right, but for folks who don't do that, we pay our premiums and we're essentially getting a term policy. Right?
Yes.
So then why would we consider term if essentially you can already do that by just simply not electing the deferred compensation account?
Group term life as a product generally tends to have lower premiums than a group universal life.
All right, so what's before us now is basically submitting these 4 options. Doesn't lock us into making a final decision. We can come back and see the responses and make a determination from there. Sean, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question. So, I mean, if somebody who is signed up for the group universal life and is not contributing to the cash value account, sounds like they're paying a higher premium than they need to be paying for what they're getting. If they like compared to a term life, is that what's going on? They're not getting any additional value. I just want to clarify from the discussion, because that's my takeaway from what was from that exchange you just had.
People, any plan participant in the group universal life plan would have the ability to make additional premium contributions into that cash value account. I appreciate that in the scenario you're describing, a person wouldn't avail themselves of that ability. So yes, they would be paying higher premiums for a plan that is functioning similarly to a group term life, but they do still have a benefit through the cash value account that they're not taking advantage of.
Right, but if you take it from the perspective of somebody, so they're not using the benefit, then they're not getting the benefit of it. Maybe they don't want it, right? So they're paying, if all the person wants is essentially term life, this is their option, and they're paying a higher premium than they would if they were just offered term life. I just want to be clear about that, right? If let's say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, so, and let's say there's somebody who is, I mean, they're saving through the, the state's, defined contribution retirement plan. And so they're not looking for another way to save money. Right. So they're just looking for term life. So, somebody like that, right, it's what it sounds to me. I know you're saying they're paying a higher premium because they're getting the option, but if they don't want the option, I don't see how they're deriving value from that. In fact, it seems like a hypothetical value.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your point. They would be paying higher premiums for the benefit offering that they have currently today.
Okay, thanks.
This is Josette again, but we don't know how much higher, right?
Correct. There is not a lot of benchmark information available about plan premiums in the comparison between group universal life and group term life, and that's largely because the prevalence of group universal life in the marketplace is relatively low, very low compared to group term life. Part of the rationale for having options 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 is that it gives the state the ability to make that direct comparison, all else being equal in terms of plan design, the difference between the group universal life and the group term life by premiums.
So are you saying if we RFP'd for, say, 2 and 4, there wouldn't be the same confusion?
It goes back to telling the bidders, are you only offering option 2 or option 4? Or are you offering 2 and 4 as a side-by-side? That's where the confusion comes into play when more than one option is offered at once.
Yeah, and I guess that's my sort of the point that I'm trying to get at is we don't know that term rates are lower, and the only way to find that out is to RFP only for term rates, but that puts us in danger of losing a better product. If it is better, I don't know, but it puts us in danger of losing a better product because we didn't RFP for it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, but we're recommending to have all 4 options out there. It's just no telling what we're going to get back. We may not get any responses for GUL, but my assumption is that we will.
Well, right, because I mean we already have a contract with one, right? So
right.
For that purpose. So I mean I would assume that they would rebid on what we asked for. But yeah, my concern is if even if we were to say we're trying to make a decision between universal and term, particularly if the decision was to go to see what we have to offer for term, we're giving up something without having enough information to know if it's even beneficial in the end. I don't think our insurance premiums are outrageous, having looked at outside insurance, but that's me.
Tom, you got your hand up?
Yeah, something related, but not exactly on where we're tracking now, though. If we were to switch completely from a group universal life and let's say we get a good offering for a term life, what are the chances that the new insurer is going to require medical examinations, proof of X, Y, and Z to someone who is currently in a group universal life with, qualified for it, let's say 25 years ago, And if they get put into a new plan, is there a chance that they may lose their coverage because they don't fit the criteria for this term life insurance?
It's a great question, but the answer is typically no. So group coverage, when it's transitioned to a new carrier, is done on a no loss, no gain basis, meaning no employee would lose coverage as a result of a carrier change, as long as the coverage amounts fall within the plan maximum. And the way that we've been talking about the plan design is, in this case, it will. This is also true if the plan changes from group universal life to term life, and we would typically transition that on a similar no loss, no gain basis. So people wouldn't have to go through the process of proof of good health again unless they were changing the amount of coverage that they were electing.
So if you were changing the amount of coverage, or if, let's say you said, I'm not going through with this change, I'm opting out, and then you tried to opt back in, you would have to go through that type of screening.
If you elected at the higher base salary,
you elected at the higher, right?
Multiples, right?
Right. So if you so if you came in at a base salary that was, let's say you did it when you were hired, and you were at a base salary of $42,000 a year, but at this point you have, moved up the salary chain, and you're making more, and you try, when this comes back up, you try to apply for the new base salary level, would you have to go back through it, or does it automatically get baked in?
As part of the plan design today, employees can elect from 1 to 3 times their base salary without proof of good health. That includes an annual open enrollment election up to 3 times their base salary. Okay. And the base salary, and SBO team, please chime in if I misstate this, but the base salary should update as someone keeps their current coverage multiple, but if they get salary increases throughout their tenure, it should carry through.
Gotcha. Okay. Chief Justice?
So I would move that we send out for bid the options as presented, that in the solicitations we make clear what their plans would be for any transition, and not do a combined bid for GUL plus term life, because it's going to be too hard to bid unless we're going to spend months figuring out how to get them the information that they need to price it. So that would be what I would move.
Love that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion before we go to a second?
Could you please repeat the motion?
Sure. So we've got a slide that presents 4 options that we go out to bid. And I would say to present it in that, but make sure in whatever solicitation we have, there's clarity around people if they are going to either have to or want to transition their plans to another plan, another type of plan, and not do what we've been discussing earlier, which is combine bidding for a GUL and a alternative term life, because it's too hard to price. And Jacqueline, you tell me if I made sense in what I've just said. She's shaking her head, so I take that as a yes.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. So you have them in the response highlight what a transition plan would look like for transition individuals who are in an existing plan into any of the new plan that they're presenting.
Yeah, which would mean like things like, prior conditions or medical exams or whatever. And if those aren't required, then that ought to be part of the information that they supply.
All right. Sean, you had your hand up?
Yeah, not to over process things, but we did have a motion on the table with a motion and a second. So I don't know how you want to navigate that.
I forgot all about that motion. All right.
I'll withdraw the motion in favor of Justice Sykes' motion, if that's acceptable.
All right, so that motion has been withdrawn. So now we have to put a new motion on the table. So you're up again.
You're going to make me say it again?
Hey, look, third time's a charm.
All right, we have the 4 options presented by WTW. We go out to bid on those 4 options, and we make sure that as part of the information provided, they make sure they have full information on any changes to qualifications or any transitions from one plan to another, so that we have transparency into what the downsides might be of choosing either term or GOL going forward. And we will not solicit both a GUL and a group term life plan as a combination bid because it's too hard to price.
All right, it's been moved. Before we ask for a second, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, do we have a second?
It's Josette, I second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept options 1 through 4 with the caveat that a transition plan be included by the respondents to the RFP for each of the options that they are bidding for. All in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose.
Opposed by Tom Bracken. Any abstention? Ayes have it. Let's move to the audit services requests for proposal.
Thank you, Director. So similar story. I'll try to be very quick with going through the updates. Very little has changed from last meeting to this one. Essentially, we wanted to recap the discussion that we've had around the audit services RFP. Really, the key decision point for the committee to make comes down to the characteristics of the potential vendors that would be participating in an audit RFP. We talked last time about how historically most medical and prescription drug claim audit services have focused on retrospective reviews of plan experience. That means once claims have been processed and paid and have fully run out any potential adjustments, any potential claims reprocessing that does happen from time to time in the course of administering medical and prescription drug benefits. For various reasons, including challenges in data timeliness and data sharing agreements, technology, those have all been the reasons that have gone into these retrospective reviews. And that currently aligns with the state's current claim auditor and the contract of services that they are performing for the current claim audits that the state has already gone through. There have been a very limited number of emerging vendors recently within the last several years that have entered the market claiming the ability to provide more ongoing and real-time administrative claims and fee reviews. So this would be different from your retrospective, more traditional claim audits. We're not seeing a very large vendor marketplace here. As I said, there's very little, if any, overlap with the more traditional audit services. From our point of view, these types of claim reviews would not replace the traditional claim audits that have been conducted as part of your past RFPs. We did get some feedback from the subcommittee members, which we reviewed last time. Their general preference was to have the RFP focus on just the more traditional claim audit vendors in this space. However, from our meeting last month, Secretary DeMatteis voiced a preference to have the next audit services RFP request proposals from both emerging as well as traditional audit vendors. The other update I'll highlight here, and then I'll pause for comments, questions, reactions from the committee, is just an overview of some of the key updates that were made in the written summary of the scope of services for this audit that was included in your meeting materials for today. Those updates include referencing just being clear about the number of medical plan options for both non-Medicare and Medicare plans that would be included within the requested audit services. Similarly, providing that same type of clarification for the non-Medicare and Medicare prescription drug plans, both the commercial and the employer group waiver plans would also be included in the audit. providing clarity on the plan years and the dates associated with different audit activities that would be covered under the scope of services, and the contract that would be awarded from the RFP itself. Some clarification that other third-party services that are part of the broader state group health plan, including the services provided by Employer Direct Healthcare Surgery Plus program, as well as Prudent RX, be potentially included in the audit services under the RFP. Also including some additional description to specifically address the PBM requirements under the House Bill 219 of the 151st General Assembly, which included the requirement for brand drug claims that are processed in the state of Delaware to use National Average Drug Acquisition Cost, or NADAC pricing. That's a different type of pricing than some of the other drugs that are covered under the contract are processed by. And so we wanted to include that additional clarity for bidders to know as well. And then finally, noting a few buy-up services for the state's consideration at the future point in time when quotes are received for these services. So all in all, I would say more nuanced updates just to provide further clarity, as opposed to material changes in the scope of services, which do include both both traditional and emerging audit capabilities as a reflection of the feedback we heard from our last meeting. So I'll pause and open it up for questions, comments, feedback from the committee about whether there's interest in memorializing this expanded scope of services in the next audit services RFP, and potentially if there's interest in shortening the contract term awarded from this next RFP process. Typically, it's been three years for the contract with 2 additional 1-year optional renewal periods. There's a potential opportunity to shorten that to a 2-year contract with 3 1-year optional renewal periods, which again would be potentially to provide an opportunity to run an RFP a year sooner to more quickly test the market than potentially what we would be looking at with a 3-year contract award.
What will be the value in getting out there quicker for the RFP?
Potentially more experience in the next 2 years, 3 years from the emerging vendors in this space. There are very few plan sponsors that have availed themselves of these services currently, so it's even too soon to really have any real results yet. But in the next 1 to 2 years, it's possible that that could continue to evolve.
Chief Justice Sykes.
Sorry to prolong this.
Oh, you're good.
So what are the downsides of including real-time audit capabilities? And second question is, if we go to a 2-year as opposed to a 3-year term, is it going to cost us more to have a shorter contract? In other words, when I say cost us more, you know what I mean, on an average annual basis, because they have more experience with us, we're investing in them for 3 years, so they can give us a better price for 3 as opposed to 2.
Sure, that's a fair possibility around shortening the contract. In terms of the first point around there being a downside, I would say probably the biggest downside would just be that there would be additional work on the PRC's end to potentially evaluate a broader pool of bidders that would come from including the emerging vendors in this space as, you know, other potential players in this RFP.
Yeah, I don't really see the value in going to 2-year terms just to enhance the pool of people who are going to charge us more. I mean, I'm sorry for looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and I'll say that there's 2 different choices too. So yeah. we could broaden the pool and keep it a 3-year term.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to vote to broaden the pool. We would only have to vote to go to 2-year versus 3-year terms. I mean, am I off with that? I mean, we're voting on the optional terms of years of term.
correct, as that's part of the written scope of services. The other open question for the committee's decision would be to keep the scope broader, meaning include both the traditional audit vendors as well as those with the real-time emerging capabilities, or narrow it to just the traditional vendors.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so for that question, you know, I don't really see an issue with keeping the options out there for both of those bidders to come to the table, unless anybody else sees a concern with broadening the scope. I mean, I understand your question of what the real-time capabilities are, but I think we would learn more about that once we start getting responses.
Yeah, Saran, this is Josette. I don't know why we would turn down an opportunity to get real-time data if we could, and
Yeah.
maybe we don't like what we see in the RFP, but why would we turn down the opportunity to explore it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I definitely am on board with expanding the scope of the services in the next RFP. I'm not really too certain about the benefit of going to a 2-year term with 3 one-year options versus a 3-year term with 2 one-year options for a couple of reasons, and they may not be important to everybody, but I just feel like a shorter term year just puts more work on the team to try to turn these around every 2 years versus 3 years. But also, I don't see a scenario where we start going to 2-year terms and don't have increased costs associated with shortening the terms. Even though we could still have utilized other option, the option, I would just be concerned about that.
Saran, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What does Faith and her team think about the 2-year versus 3-year period? And I agree with Secretary Manning about why not have more options. So I'd like to hear Faith's opinion.
Faith, do you have an opinion on the operational component of the 2 versus 3-year?
Director Kate, I would concur with your point of view on this, that the 3-year initial term would be better operationally.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion from anybody based on this conversation. So would any member like to make a motion to approve expansion of the scope of the audit services RFP? Because that's the only thing that we would need to vote on here is expansion, because we already have baked in the 3-year contract, so I don't think we need to vote on bullet 2, right? We would only need to vote on that if we were going to change it. So right now we're just voting on whether to expand the scope of services as recommended for the audit services RFP.
Saran, sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. I'll second.
All right, this is Josette. I make the motion to include real-time audit capabilities in the audit services RFP.
And I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we have, well, I'm assuming we don't have any more discussion on this topic. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. For the sake of time, one, thank you all for participating. For the sake of time, we're going to skip item number 8, House Resolution 32, and push that back to our October meeting. I don't think we have any timeline issues associated with that. So with that, the next thing in our schedule would be executive session. So I think we need a motion to move into executive session unless there are any other comments.
So moved.
Housekeeping items. So moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, move to executive session. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move over to executive session. Thank you, everybody, for participation.
Director Kate, we will return to
And
public
we
session
will,
to vote on the items being discussed in executive.
okay, and we are back. Faith, if you want to give a heads up when everybody is back and we have a quorum.
We're still pulling new members back in. Just give us just a couple seconds.
And can we make sure, and Claire's jumping back into public session, can we make sure she gets elevated as a panelist?
Yeah. We have a quorum. We have a quorum. Secretary DeMatteis, you want to go?
Yes, I do have, my mic is enabled. Thank you. Based on the presentation, I would make a motion that we accept option 2 to pay 50% of the cost as outlined by the discussion with Director Rents.
This is Josette, I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please state by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining from CJ.
All right, we have one abstention, Chief Justice.
Same for the next one too.
Correct. All right.
Secretary DeMatteis, I think that takes us to the disability appeal for vote.
I'm sorry, I'm abstaining for both votes.
Yeah, I got that one. We'll mark that when we do the vote. Do we have a motion?
This is Tom. I make a motion that we accept the recommendation and extend the disability benefits through 5/29 of 24.
All right, it's been moved. We have a second.
Second, this is the Lieutenant Governor.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
This is Claire. I'm going to vote no.
This is Josette, I vote no.
We have 2 opposed, and we have 1 abstention from the Chief Justice. In Faith, does that stipulate that the ayes have it?
I believe that's, yes, they have it. Thank you. I think unless there was other business, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Motion to
moved.
adjourn. Second.
It's moved. Do we have it's been moved and second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.